Okay, shh. Listen to this. This is the tape I found downstairs.
This is Professor Raymond Noble, Department of Ancient History, log entry number 2. I believe I have made a significant find.
Death has come to your little town, Sheriff.
Don't you blame the movies! Movies don't create psychos! Movies make psychos more creative!
We have some sights to show you.
Join us! Join us! Who's laughing now? I'm gonna hurt you. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome back to SplatterCast. We were just saying before we started, it feels like it's been a minute. We're on the new schedule. We're doing these once a month, and it just feels a little different. Feels a little weird, does it not? That we haven't done an official SplatterCast in like over a month. So,
I know everything that we do is so targeted and streamlined now, where it's like, oh, we're specifically talking about this. We don't really do. I mean, we end up talking forever anyway, but like we haven't done long form stuff in a hot minute.
I know. So I'm happy to be back with this one. This, last month, we had my pick, which was The Thing, to kick us off for 2023 here. I had a lot of fun discussing that on John Carpenter's birthday of all days. And then, of course, that means that this is Luke's pick. And I know he was very excited about this. You had this kind of primed and in the canon for, a few months and at the end of 2022, didn't you? Like this kind of, had kind of figured everything out before you really came to this. But yeah, this was for a minute.
Yeah, well, this was on my list for a long, long time. Even when we had first started, I think I was like, this was one of the things that I initially wanted to talk about, just because I have a fascination. Obviously, if anyone listens to the podcast, that I wanted to do Tremors 2. I wanted to do Child. It's always the sequels that get me, like that direct sequel from the original, because you have so many iconic films that everyone talks about, and then sometimes it takes a while for those sequels to get any love, and I think Psycho 2 kind of falls into that. I think probably over the past few years it's been coming a little more evident and more so out there for people, and people are becoming a little more aware of Psycho 2. But I mean, I think a lot of going back like 10 years, it's like, wait, Psycho has a sequel? I mean, that can't be good, but this one, for me, was intrigued because I had ran across it, and then I did a little research in it and was like, this looks like it's pretty decently rated. And then it got my intrigue, and then picked it up digitally and watched it, and I was like, damn, that's a solid sequel.
Yeah, no, this was one that I was kind of surprised when you said, we're going to do Psycho 2. All those months ago, because I was just like, I'm not familiar at all with any of these sequels, and I just kind of disregarded them. Like, I feel like a lot of people have, because they're just like, it's Alfred Hitchcock. That's the guy who did the first one. I mean, what are you going to do? It's an all-time, like, one of the great grandfathers of horror films. So it's one of those things where it's like, how are you going to top that? How are you going to follow that up? I really just was pretty skeptical. I'm not going to lie. I genuinely, when you brought this up, was like, okay, maybe it's something you have nostalgia for. I don't know if this is going to be as good as, you're making it out to be. Kind of like the whole Jaws 2 thing, where, I had told you how much I love Jaws 2 and how it's so underrated. And you were like, okay, we'll see about that. But, surprisingly enough, I think they brought it up on something. They were talking about Tom Holland. I think when we were talking about Child's Play 2. I was kind of doing some research. I had watched Child's Play 1, so obviously they're talking about Tom Holland and his career, and he wrote this. And one of the people on one of these podcasts I was listening to went on like a little tangent for about 2 minutes about how much they love Psycho 2. And I was just kind of like, okay, well, Luke had brought that one up, so we'll see when we get there. Well, the time is here, and the time is now. I've watched Psycho 2. And I got to say, when you're talking about films that follow up all-time classics, we've got things like I said, Jaws 2. It's a great movie to me. I love it. I absolutely adore it. Psycho 2, this is a pretty damn good movie. I'm not going to lie. I was surprised. I genuinely was watching this, and I was like, okay, we're getting into this. It's like, it's pretty standard, pretty much what I expected. Noraman Bates is going crazy again. And then there's a little bit of a switch that happens. And that's when I was just like, okay, I'm fucking in. This, I understand now. Have been indoctrinated into the cult of Psycho 2. I get it. I see why people are so high on this movie. And, not to jump too far ahead here, but I got to say, I got to put a lot of that onto the writing. I think that this was tackled with a lot of care. And I'm excited to dive into it and hear what little behind the scenes nuggets you have for us as we go deeper into the backstory of this film.
Yeah, it's very intriguing, especially I did read the book in preparation for the podcast. And the book is very different. Big variation. So kind of I know we'll get into it, but getting Tom Holland on the script, and it was kind of a big group effort, I guess, from Hilton A. Green, Richard Franklin, and then we got Tom Holland to kind of get those ideas and really put it into a script form. And this is what we get. I think this, when you look at the original Psycho, and you're like, how do you follow that up? How do we even imagine of doing a sequel? And it's like, that's a giant task to undertake. Even some of these people believed it was career suicide to even attempt at doing a sequel to the Alfred Hitchcock classic. And I don't know. Like obviously, I picked it. I think they knocked it out of the park. This for me has unlimited rewatch value. Ever since I've seen it that initial time, I've watched it a handful of times. It's one of those ones that if I'm scrolling, I'll see the little poster on Vudu for Psycho 2. I've guilty as charged. I have clicked on it more than a couple of times. But 10 years ago, I was in the same camp as you because we both worked at a used media store, me a little bit before you. And around that time, the big book it was all four, came out, the Psycho collection.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember getting those in all the time. People kept bringing them in because they were new. And it was just, I remember looking at it and being like, what the hell? There's 3 other sites out there. And I, disregarded it as this can't be anything good. But it proved me wrong. It took me a while to get there, but I'm glad I got there.
Yeah, and it is interesting because this did kind of push me down a rabbit hole, like I said before we started recording, of at least looking into, so I could be mildly familiar with the series as a whole, into the sequels. And obviously Mick Garris did one where he did number 4, which honestly seems like it's kind of like a precursor to the ideas that they would later follow up on with Bates Motel, which is a series I'm not familiar with, but I hear a lot of good things. You said you saw the first season of that?
I saw the first season, extremely solid.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it, at least from the first season. I started diving in the second season, but time got away from me and I never fully committed. I think it's got 5 seasons out there, but that first season, extremely strong.
Yeah.
And there's an Akron, Ohio reference. So.
Oh, really? That's great. Yeah. So it's one of those things too, where it's like, as far as like the Psycho world goes, in my mind, it's always just been, the first one, that's as good as you're going to get. It's like if you would have told me that, sitting 2023, I would now have another film in here that I could be like, hey, this is, dare I say, just as good, if not more interesting than the first film. I know that's going to be maybe sacrilege to some film purists, but I mean, this movie, to kind of get into it, gave me kind of these, I don't know, it's just something about these mid-'80s films.
Yep.
Where it's like it has that same kind of thing. You bring up things like Christine, and stuff like that, where it's like, for some reason, they have this warmth to them where it's like I just kind of fall into the story, fall into the characters. It's just really, you could tell that whoever was behind the writing of this, as we know, Tom Holland, had some really deep passion for the material and the character of Norman Bates, and really wanted to humanize him. And I think that's probably one of my first big positives I can give the film, is just taking somebody who was, as iconic as Norman Bates. He's a murderer. He's somebody that big twist in Psycho, haunted audiences for decades. And now you're telling me that, we're going to humanize him. And not only that, but we're going to go to the point where he is the victim in this story. And I think that when that switch happens and you find out who's behind this, I don't want to throw it right off the rip, because we do want people to watch this, but in a lot of ways, he's a victim in this story, and it's insane to me. I really, honestly, like, that's when I think I fully connected with it. But beforehand, again, it reminds me of that, like, Silver Bullet, like I said, Christine vibes of just like everything, all those tones that I could say are unique to our friendship and everything, of like movies that we've bonded on over the last, like, God, how many years has it been? It's been a while. We're getting up there. But it's one of those things where it's like, those are movies that, like, this is definitely this feels like a nice summer afternoon. Like, if I was a younger kid, maybe around like 9 or 10, seeing this on like an AMC Fear Fest or something like that, and just it coming on and just being like absorbed in it. Like, I'm so excited to revisit this film after watching it, because it's very solid, and it does give me those feelings and those vibes of just like, this is higher quality than it should be by all standards. And it's one of those things where it's like, it is very rewatchable. Like you said, I'm already itching, and I just finished it as of recording this. I think I finished it last Thursday, and it's Monday. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I am so looking forward to throwing this on again and just diving back into this world.
Yeah, and I think I'm right there with you, where obviously the original Psycho, Hitchcock classic, great film. But like, for rewatch value, for me, my money is on Psycho 2, because it falls in the realm of that early to mid 80s stuff. It got that feeling, like you said, and it's just something that I find to be a lot of fun. And like, for me, I am so upset that this never appeared on television. Like, I never saw this on TV ever, so it was never something I had to stumble upon. You had to actively go out and look at this.
I never saw like Psycho anything other than the first. Like, really, and on any television broadcast, I'm sure it was there, but maybe it was just we weren't on the channels at the time, or maybe I just disregarded it because it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, I saw Psycho. I remember I watched it with my mother. One Halloween, it was like October-ish, and like it was on like the week before Halloween, and I watched it in my parents' bedroom. We just laid in bed, and I just watched it. We ate popcorn and had a good time, because I was really young when we did that. I'm talking like maybe 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where, even to me, being the movie fan that I am, she was kind of worried that she's like, oh, it's black and white, I'm not sure if you're going to be into it. But my dad, knowing me a little better with the movie stuff, was just like, oh no, he'll get sucked up into it. And I did. I was very much into it. So I've always had an affinity for that film with that memory. So it's like, yeah, it just kind of becomes one of those things that I think for a lot of people, when they see the original Psycho, they feel the same way, where it's like, wow, this is like one of those films that's always referenced, through not just horror cinema, but just cinema in general, as an essential. One of the ones that like was groundbreaking for everything that we see in the modern day, as far as like, people going to the theater and, the word of mouth and everything of getting people out there like, oh my God, don't tell anybody the ending kind of thing. And it's just like, to have that, and then to almost have these swept up under the rug, like you said, until, very recently, within the last 10 years, it's interesting because, again, and I'm going to probably repeat myself 100 times in this podcast with this, because of the amount of care that this has to it.
Yeah.
And, it's like there was a lot of respect for that source material. And that is extremely rare for not only horror sequels, but 80s horror sequels.
Yeah.
Because even the franchises we love to death, like Halloween's and Friday the 13th, especially, Nightmare on Elm Street's, it's like you get to a point where it's just, we are just throwing ideas at the wall and seeing what sticks. And we are disregarding, like, lore, we're disregarding history, character motivations, all of that, as opposed to something like this where you would think it's like that. But no, it's totally respectful to everything. There is one aspect to this, which I'll save probably towards the end, that I gotta say, as I've thought on it, I do need to watch it again because it's kind of one of the bigger twists, I would say, of the film. That kind of I don't know how it sits with me, but overall, watching it, it's a breeze, and it's really got itself a lot of you know. Again, I keep coming back to this feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but again, it's like that kind of 80s magic is in this film, and it's like it's nice. It's always a pleasure to discover a gem like that.
Yeah.
And it's wild.
Maybe it's a certain cinematographer, I don't know, but
That is true. That is very true.
We'll get into it. But like, I think you said it perfectly, drawing the comparisons, because it was never really in my head until you had just said it, where this is a very Jaws 2 scenario where that first film is perfection. So it's like,
Yeah.
for a lot of people, it becomes, this is the essential viewing. This is all you need to know. Disregard everything else. And, for me, I think I had seen Jaws 2 a couple times on television, but again, it was never played nearly the amount of times that Jaws was played. So like a lot of these sequels like this, you have to actively seek out. And like, we talk about Jaws and Jaws 2, where Jaws 2, that can pretty much stand alone on its own merit. If we title it something different, it's still a great shark film. Now, this one, Psycho 2, I feel like maybe does need that connective tissue from the original Psycho.
It does.
So it's like, because I think that amplifies, especially our sympathy and how we kind of resonate with the Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates character, especially going from that jump from the events of that first one and how we leave off there, and then how we open up in Psycho 2, and how he becomes, at least from my standpoint, a very sympathetic character, someone you feel sorry for a lot of the times throughout this entire film.
Yeah, and it's got a lot to say about, like, prison reform.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of broad messages about, like, can we let this guy back into society, and how you're treated when you come back into society. It's like there's people in this story who sympathize with Norman because they understand the story of what happened with him and his mother. And then there's people who are just like, no, you're the murderer, you're a psycho, and you're a killer. And they do a really good job of, like, explaining that, which is something again, in the 80s, I do not see that happening. Like, to a degree, some people will say, as they've grown affinity for him, like, oh, I sympathize for Jason because he drowned and he was a little kid and everything. But no, that's not their intent. That's not the storyteller's intent. You're not supposed to sympathize with Michael Myers. In the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre from the 70s, Toby Hooper was like, yeah, you can sympathize for, Leatherface because he's afraid and he doesn't know what to do. All these people keep coming into his house, but he's still a monster. You know what I mean? Like, and the family is still a monster. So it's kind of like, this is like one of those rare tales where you take somebody who was a horror icon in and of itself. I mean, I think that's safe to say. And, you bring him into this time when everything is so hyper stylized and hyper gore, hyper violence, which it's got its gore, it's got its violence, but it still has that respect in the class of that original film. And again, it's just one of those things where I did not expect that coming into this. I didn't expect it. And it makes me, again, curious, because the brief research I did on the other two films, to see that does very much, at least with the character of Norman Bates, seem to hold. They seem to at least respect that character throughout. Say what you will about the scenarios they put him in, but it does seem like they kind of try to keep that over. And, when you have somebody like Anthony Perkins, who's such a well-respected actor and who literally was a groundbreaking twist of a performance in that Hitchcock film, to kind of come in and get to expand this role more, even if we didn't have 3 and 4, I love that. And again, I think that's why I love Jaws 2 and why I love movies like this who take their time and they really show care to the source material, because you just get more time with characters. You get to expand a bit. You watch Psycho, you don't sympathize for Norman. Maybe in the slightest hint in a conversation with a friend later on down the road, sure, but that's not the intent of the film. The intent of this film, again, is to make you see it from the other side. And I truly love that. I think that that is a really brilliant take for a sequel.
Yeah, and it just we'll touch briefly before we actually get into the story itself, but like what a bold move it was in 1983 for this to be the take in the screenwriting effort that was put in here. Because as we're sitting there in 1983 and slasher horrors at its boom, we've had already our Friday 13th sequel, we've had our Halloween 2, and all the horror icons are already coming out to play in the 80s by the time Psycho 2 hits the theater. And it's just like you have Norman Bates rubbing elbows with a Michael Myers and with a Jason Voorhees, and it's very unique to be like, let's put this horror icon back out there into the theater and see what sticks. And again, like you said, you can kind of go back and watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre and you can kind of pick out when Leatherface is kind of having this little bit breakdowns, and you can tell that he's a tortured character, but it's easy to overlook that the first few viewings. But like Psycho 2 is, I think they really did set out to make you sympathize with Norman Bates. They wanted a different spin, where it's like the original Psycho, it's very clear, those lines are evident of, hero and villain. And then we kind of want to switch it up in Psycho 2 and, play with your emotions. And I think that is a great balance in screenwriting. That's a great exercise to do something like that. And because nowadays in 2023, we're all dealing in shades of gray here. Whereas, back then it was really black and white. You're either good or you're bad. And we really wanted to take Norman Bates on this story arc that we really don't ever see, especially from films way back when. Whereas nowadays, I think this resonates even more with a modern audience, because it's like, well, victim of circumstance, and I'm really starting to, sympathize and kind of feel what Norman Bates is feeling, and as soon as he's released from prison.
I was listening to Beyond the Void's podcast today, actually, of all days, about Scream. And I don't think it was necessarily about Scream. I wish I could pull it out of my brain, but I'm blanking on it right now, exactly what they were talking about. But they did bring up a good point that, Hollywood seems to really dislike, gray characters. They want that clear cut, good guy, bad guy. Like nobody can be morally ambiguous. And it is interesting to see that a lot of our media has been kind of turning to that over the last few years. I think it does show that, a lot of, our parents' generation and the generation before that, especially the generation before that, when like Psycho was made, it was very clear cut of who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. You had your Westerns and everything, but now we have characters like with The Last of Us on TV, or Joel, very morally gray character. Like he is a good guy at the end of the day, and we can sympathize with him, but he has done horrible things to, questionably good or bad people. Self-preservation becomes a huge thing in our society these days. So the fact that, a film like this in the 80s was, again, like you said, able to take that, and the screenwriters are able to say, yeah, we have an unlikable murderer character here. What if we, made him our hero in a sense? Which I'm not saying that he is, but, he is someone we are rooting for in the film, like more so than anybody else. You want, Norman to be reformed at a certain point. Like I said at the beginning, it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, all right, it's an act. He's totally playing this up. I'm just waiting for that shoe to drop. But then you start to kind of realize, like, oh God, no, like he genuinely wants and has wanted to, be reformed, start a new life, get past those events from the 60s. And it does leave you feeling very conflicted halfway through the film. And then by the end, I don't know about you, I was in Norman's camp. Even with the final frame and everything, I was just sitting there like, you go, Queen. I'm happy for you. There you go, King. Like, let's go. Like, that's how I feel.
And I'll say, I think I was in Norman's camp very early on. And I think that's just because of the portrayal that Anthony Perkins brings to Norman Bates and that dynamic.
He's very likable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like one of those things where we talk about, these gray characters. And I think nowadays an audience is more hungry for those layered characters. And, with those layered characters becomes the shades of gray, where it's like, with this character in this moment, but the next moment I dislike them. And I think that goes not just with Norman in Psycho 2, this goes with the villain in Psycho 2 when you look back at the original Psycho and kind of how all these circumstances are playing, where it's like if you kind of look through the lens of each different character, you understand where they're all coming from. So it's really hard to like look at it and root against all the time each different character, because there are ways you can sympathize for each different one. I think that is really just a showcase in the Tom Holland screenwriting and the elements that he brings to Psycho 2, because again, we'll talk about the book, and the book does none of it.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear what's going on with the book. You gave me a little tease the other day when we were working on some projects at your house. So it's like, I'm very curious to see how they go about handling that. But yeah, I think now is as good a time as any. Why don't we get into the actual story of Psycho 2, really start diving deep here. And let's go with our first segment, which we like to call the account of the macabre.
They could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare.
Yes, folks. So this is where we kind of dive into our story section. We like to kind of sometimes go through the story beat by beat. Really depends on the project. But for the most part, we really go in detail here. Like Luke's going to open up with a synopsis, and then, we're going to kind of just see how we feel and where things go. And just talk about major elements of the film. And I know, Luke, you want to preface this with kind of a spoiler warning. So I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, well, so this one, I think this is a film where in the past, I do like to do a synopsis of straight through almost the entire film. This one is going to stop at a particular point, because if you listen to us talk, we tried to tap dance around a lot of the spoilers for the first 25 minutes of this podcast. We're going to dive into spoilers. Obviously, it's unavoidable, but the synopsis here is pretty spoiler free. Maybe just moments that aren't really going to compromise your viewing. But if that's the case and you haven't seen Psycho 2 and you by chance clicked on this just to listen to us talk, because why not? I encourage, after I'm done with the synopsis, is to kind of click off, maybe give Psycho 2 a viewing, and then come back on in, and then we can all talk spoilers. But yeah, so I'm going to dive into the synopsis here. Let's get going with the account of the macabre. All right, home sweet home for Norman Bates as he gets released from prison after 22 long years, when the state of California decides killing 7 people was no big deal. As Norman gets settled back into his childhood home, he decides to stop slicing up people and give slicing lettuce a try as he starts working at a diner. Norman can't shake his old habits as he finds himself infatuated with Mary, a new waitress at the diner who is having relationship problems of her own. Norman invites Mary to stay at the motel FOC for the time being, but when he takes Mary to the famous Bates Motel, he finds out Mr. Toomey is leaving more than just chocolates on the guest pillow. Staying with Norman, Mary starts to feel a little paranoid, but as long as she doesn't take a shower, what's the worst that could happen? Norman starts receiving calls from his mother as his paranoia starts to get the best of him. He starts to wonder if he is back to his old ways. With bodies stacking up and people going missing, it seems like Mother could be back, and she is cooking up more than her famous toasted cheese sandwiches. So that is Psycho 2 in a nutshell. A little more happens after that, but I kind of wanted to leave you on a little cliffhanger note there.
Absolutely. And of course, like Luke said, if you have not seen Psycho 2 and you want to give it a chance to check it out, now is your time to click off. But after that, we're going to start diving in. And yes, Luke, where do you want to start with this? You want to start from the beginning and kind of work our way through, or
Yeah,
just
I don't see why not. We open, with Norman getting out, making that judgment, and we're introduced, to the doctor, Dr. Raymond. We have, Norman sitting there, and we're, of course, treated to a familiar face, Mrs. Lila Loomis, Vera Miles from the original as well, which they're bringing up these interesting circumstances. He's got the petition of Norman should not be released. She's got 700 and some change signatures saying he needs to stay. He's not reformed, but the judge has made his judgment, so to speak, and Norman is released to go about his way. Which I think some people kind of picked this one out, where it's like, would he really be released at this point? After all the events of the original Psycho, which I understand the kind of contention there. But I think it plays a different way, where, especially being in 1983, when we're really dealing with mental health, kind of a little more obscure. They didn't really know what to think of it. I mean, we watch Mindhunter, and you kind of realize the kind of openings of serial killers and things like that. I don't think they really knew what they were in for that much around 1982, 1983. So for me, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I know some people kind of pick it apart for that one, but for me, it doesn't ruin my viewing of it.
Yeah, and we talk about some of the characters that you brought up here, like Dr. Raymond. I think that's an excellent character, very ambiguous on exactly what his intentions are throughout the film. I think it's not until up to the final moments, which again, I do appreciate for a film that is kind of coming off something that was so reliant on the massive twist that it provided, for them to still, be able to weave this cat and mouse game of, if Norman's not the killer, if we are to believe that he is not murdering people, then, who is? And I think that, Robert Loggia? Loggia. Okay, gotcha. Playing Dr. Raymond does an excellent job of, walking that line of like, okay, you can see that he actually at the start seems to really care about Norman's progress. He's been working with him for a long time. And then again, talk about morally gray stuff here. It's like, as it continues, you kind of start to get suspicious yourself. Is like, okay, maybe he's not as innocent as we think. And yeah, he does meet a pretty bitter end, but we will get to that here in a little bit. But yeah, I think it is an interesting angle and very awesome to see, Vera Miles come back and play her original character again.
Yeah.
Actually, it does show, I guess, to the strengths of the writing there, to be able to pull somebody in from that original cast to come back and play with this. But yeah, I like the angle the second she started with it, of petitioning his release. And I do like the early half, I guess the first act here of you have a lot of people, again, like I said earlier, who are okay, let's give him a chance. The system, we got to let it play out, we got to let it do its thing and work. Let's have him come out, see what he can do, see if he's actually reformed. And then you have people who are just like, no, he's a monster, he'll never change. You're just lining people up for the slaughter again. Like, this is a dangerous move. And again, it plays with those morals. It plays with what do we do as a society? Because it's like, again, prison and things like that, incarceration is its moral functions, and at the core is about reform. Whether our society actually practices that or not, it's questionable at best. And as we've continued to go as a society, it's become pretty clear that that's probably not the case. But it is something where morally that is what it is supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a very interesting angle to start the story with.
And I think that just the Psycho concept is, character wise and circumstance, everything that is just loaded into this film, I think just makes this so intriguing, because everything that we're dealing with is, I keep going back to mental health, and it's like, in 1982, 1983, mental health was not put at the forefront, especially when you're in the prison system, to say, we need to reform you mentally. And we don't really get those things. I mean, like, you see it kind of in Halloween with Dr. Loomis and Michael, but, he says Michael should be dead, put away. And, again, with those guys, we're dealing with more stoic characters that are just wanting to kill. Whereas this one, we're dealing with someone who feels he is reformed and wants to go back into society. And even dealing with a lot of the legacy horror characters that we see nowadays on screen. Like, how many times is the kind of equation put out there that it's like, when we're watching Halloween 2018, we're watching for that buildup for Michael and Laurie. When we're watching Scream 5, we're watching for Ghostface to meet Sidney Prescott. Whereas this one, right out of the gate, we get Norman and Lila. It's like right at that interaction plays right at the very beginning, because we're moving past it and we're telling a different story. And I think that right there at the very beginning kind of tells you what we're in for Psycho 2, where it's like, yeah, we're not going to do this thing where Norman gets released, goes back to Fairvale, and we don't really see him. He's off screen murdering people while Lila becomes the main character, and we're picking up with her, and then he's this looming specter throughout the town. It's like, we don't play that. We're playing Norman Bates is our main guy. That's a guy we're going to be going with throughout this. He's the main character of the story, which I think that really kind of buckles you in. You're like, okay, so I'm different than I expected when I first turned this film on, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, it is smart writing. Again, I'm going to praise that probably throughout this entire thing, because it really comes down to that. It's smart writing, it's smart storytelling. Kind of moving past the opening here, as we see Norman get back to the hotel, and we find out about, Mr. Toomey, somebody who's mentioned. We don't meet him just yet. That whole interaction in and of itself is very interesting. But yeah, just the kind of reveal and the grandiose kind of, come to with Norman coming back to the scene of the crime. And I appreciate that even the doctor says, hey, are you sure that you want to come back to this? Like, this is where you want to do it. Like, this is going to maybe trigger trauma, things like that. These are conversations that you don't see in any, horror movies, let alone hardly any movies in the 80s,
Yeah.
And it's so ahead of its time, honestly. And I think that it goes a long way to making this so much more relatable in the modern day.
Yeah, and that's where it's like, again, we're dealing with a lot of advanced themes, I think, where, especially for if you wanted to turn on a horror movie in the mid 80s, is, you're thinking a stab and slash, whereas Psycho 2 is not that at all. And one of the things I wanted to bring up to you, just to see how it resonates with you, because we both did read Halloween Ends, the novelization.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Raymond Menchie's leaving Norman at the house, where he says, I wish that there weren't budget cuts so we could have a social worker here, and I love that they kind of play with that. I really would have loved to see them almost extend that, because it's like, if you haven't read the novelization of Halloween Ends, they really go into like kind of budget cuts and things like that for mental health. I really would have loved to have seen them kind of amplify that theme, and it's interesting to see it played in 1983 and it's still played today, because even in today's society, I don't think necessarily mental health is put on a pedestal to say this is the number one thing that we got to take care of. So I was interested to kind of see that idea played out. Again, very smart. And I really would have loved to see him kind of play on that a little bit more.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think like with the mental health conversation, you're getting into a lot of people who are using social media and things like that to almost self-diagnose.
Yeah.
Because our healthcare system is so fractured and so twisted that, it's kind of what people have resorted to, at least here in the States. So, it's one of those things where it is interesting to see them having these conversations in 1983 and really, again, making them core elements to the story. And they do present that throughout. There's a lot of interactions where his mental health is called into question.
Yeah.
From the most crude way possible, by calling him a psycho, saying he's crazy, to people actually genuinely concerned for his well-being. And yeah, I do appreciate all the nuances that the story provides. And I think it's, again, why it's really strong in the story it's trying to tell. Because, yeah, again, coming to this place, understanding that it's a trauma trigger, it very well could set him over the edge. But again, not really pushing him away from it at the end of the day. Letting him make his own decisions. It's like, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, we have to let people, especially people who've been, reformed, take those first few steps. We got to let them make decisions. And yeah, is he probably would have done better with having a handler? Sure. Maybe somebody to help, back Norman up a little better, especially with the events that we're going to dive into with some other characters getting introduced. But yeah, it is one of those things where it's like, I think that there's a lot of mature themes in this, and I think that they really do navigate it quite well. And I did enjoy kind of, again, and this is part of storytelling for me that I like, is when you were dealing with something so iconic like the Bates Motel, and this house is like, they do present it as this almost its own entity, almost like its own character. And it's like, this is more so Norman and this character that is this house, this killing ground, coming together for the first time in 30 years? Was it 20 years?
I think it's like 22.
22 years, yeah.
And,
so I appreciate it immensely.
Well, see, and that's one of the things I was going to bring up before we get into more of the story here, where I don't know how you viewed it, but every time that I watch this film and Norman is at the house, I have this like sense of tension, because it's like, you think Mother's somewhere roaming the halls and you start hearing voices, and I'm scared for Norman's well-being as I watch this. But then as soon as he steps out, it's like it's more of a calm, I think, other than having to deal with some of the people that don't necessarily understand it. But it's like the visual standpoint there is, he never gets the Bates Motel fully painted, but I love the idea that he's painting it yellow, and then you just have this looming dark house overlooking the Bates Motel, where it's like something that he's trying to put effort in, he's trying to get people back there, and it's just like not happening. And then every time he looks at the house, he thinks he sees a figure. So I think it's just this great dichotomy that they have of the two buildings that are standing, one in the forefront, one in the background. I think is really interesting. But getting back into the story, him kind of becoming reformed, he gets a job at a diner. And this is some of my favorite interactions happen at this diner, where it's like, I think this is really where you start feeling for Norman, because he's more introduced to a lot of the outside characters, and you're seeing how he's dealing in the outside world. And he's such a reserved, meek character. And Anthony Perkins plays it so well, where, he's just kind of taking everything in, very courteous to everybody when he meets Miss Spool. And giving everyone the time of day. It's like really getting his feet wet, getting back out there. And this is where I love that they're opening up the town. I think maybe they could have even went a little more and added some characters, but I mean, this is an hour 45 already, so it's like you're really pushing that limit. But I love that they're opening up Fairvale and not just keeping it at the house, and we're really getting to see him interplay with a lot of different characters.
Yeah, and as he gets to the diner and everything, and you do talk about it, they do kind of play again on the stereotypes, or not really the stereotypes, but the groundwork that the first Psycho sets, with everybody saying like Norman couldn't hurt a fly and everything like that. He is very much that person. He is very much that, like you said, reserved kind of meek character, and I like it. And especially because when you see those switches flipping in his head, when it's like things kind of happen or something triggers him, you can see it. You can see the evil inside just trying to crawl back out, but he's got a handle on it, at least for a little while. And I think that some of the diner stuff is really interesting, especially littering it into the first act, because you get to see him, like you said, interacting with the townsfolk, trying to be a productive member of society, and not just being a recluse who owns a hotel, kind of thing. So
and
it was a smart choice.
And we're introduced to Mary, and it's like this. Again, I get nervous there as well when he's inviting her to come back to the house. I think you're supposed to, obviously you're gonna be a little hesitant to Norman Bates inviting someone back to his hotel. And I love the way they play it, because up until this point, it's like I feel like Norman's reformed. I'm sympathizing with him, and then they put that idea of, but I go back to Bates Motel with Norman Bates. It's like you can tell she's hesitant, and I think rightfully so. Again, I think it's great character building, because we're understanding the relationship. You can be in a room with Noraman Bates filled with other people and be okay, but then as soon as that kind of, why don't you come back and I'll give you a room to stay in, it's like that hesitation that exudes is like totally justified, you know. So I love the dynamics that they play with there, because it's just it's so believable, so real. And then it brings again that tension where we don't get a lot of killing in this movie. I mean, like closer toward the end, I think there is, but this really plays with your emotion a lot of the times, where it's like it's taking you on this thrill ride for really different reasons than what you would expect.
Yeah. And, you know, I got to say, Meg Tilly was somebody I didn't notice right away. I didn't recognize her, I should say, right away. But because I'm just not familiar with her work too well. But it is one of those things where I thought that she would just be a character that, you know, shows up very briefly. Maybe he kills her and then, you know, so on and so forth. But no, I was very surprised as her story continued and as she became a bigger part of this story. And yeah, she gave a great performance. I really bought into their relationship as, you know, not even like romantic interests, but friends, you know, like how, you know, she even starts to see, because once her motives are made clear, you know, it's one of those things where it's like you do see her now kind of pushing back and realizing, all right, who's the actual psychopath here? Is it, you know, us, or is it him at this point? You know what I mean? And I think that that's another uh, great moment that they chose to add to this film, great layer to it, because it does kind of it paints people who, you know, in the eyes of the public might be seen as good, and then again paints them with those morally gray overtones. So yeah, I got to give him credit there.
Yeah, and then after Mary decides to come back, FOC, free of charge. Anyone get their minds out of the gutter. And this is where we're kind of really introduced to almost that very first source of tension for Norman. I mean, we had the very beginning with Lila saying that he should not be out of prison, but then we see between Mr. Toomey and Norman. And it's like Norman being this meek character, very non-confrontational, finding drugs and understanding what has been happening at his Bates Motel, his namesake, you know, what's been going on since he's been away. And he's really got to put his foot down, you know, and he fires Mr. Toomey, tells him get out. And it's just like one of those things where I think it's perfect because Anthony Perkins plays it so well, where he's really reserved character, and then he plays off trying to be bold, but it doesn't come off nearly as bold as it should, where it's like he's still trying to be reserved, where it's like a fake kind of, I'm putting my foot down here and hoping for the best. And this is where I think the character work here really hits with me, where you really start feeling for Norman, where it's like, this dude's just trying to get through. You know, he's trying to get his life back. He's trying to do his own thing. And I don't know, especially like when he tells Mary to go up and wait for him. I'm like, you know, even that part, like he's very meek, and then it kind of gets a little dark where he's like, why don't you just go up and wait for me? You know, so it's like even in that instance, I still have a source of hesitation, especially Mary going to the house.
Oh yeah. No, I wouldn't blame anybody for having that reservation. I had that reservation too, because at this point you still just don't trust him fully. You're not sided with him. And, you know, Mr. Toomey is a fun character to introduce into this. He's, you know, he's a real piece of shit. And, you know, he is obviously going to get his comeuppance at some point in the story. And it is kind of exciting to see him get there. What I really enjoy, and I don't know, I would probably skip ahead here, but like if you have any points you want to make before we get to this, I'll just mention, is when he returns at the diner.
Yes.
So if there's any story points you want to go over before we talk about that, feel free.
Just the tension that they build between Mary and Norman in the house at night, because again, you're so scared exactly what's going to happen. Is Norman going to end up back in his old ways, or, you know, is he truly reformed? And then you have Mary there, you know, reading a book with the chair on the door, hoping that, you know.
Oh yeah, that was exactly I did enjoy that scene.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's evident as an audience we don't fully trust Norman yet, and as a character character. The story doesn't fully trust Norman for other reasons as well that we're gonna find out. But I love just that building of the relationship there, especially what we do see later on. But then, like you're saying, the next day when Mr. Toomey shows up at the diner, oh my gosh, with the note as he's cooking, it starts playing with you. Like, is this stuff really happening? Is it all in his head because he can't find the note? And it's like,
that's what I was gonna ask. Is like, do you think that Mr. Toomey actually left a note, or do you think that he just showed up to harass him?
I think Mr. Toomey showed up to harass him. I don't think he left a note. I think Mary left the note.
That's true. Yeah, I didn't consider that because at that point in the story, it's still the twist has not been revealed yet.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, that scene for me was a standout in this film. I enjoyed it a lot because it does a really great job of building the tension between the orders coming through and him harassing Mary, and you just see Norman just boiling in the back, essentially just getting more and more frustrated and aggravated. She got when he asks what's it like being with a psycho, and then she's like, oh, better than you'll ever be, fatso, or whatever.
Yeah.
I know I probably butchered that line, but it's just one of those things where when that part hits and then you see him step out and he almost reaches for the knife.
I love that scene where he's like, Mr. Toomey realizes he's looking at the knife and he goes, go for it. He's psycho and all this. It's like, I love that tension that they build right there. It's perfect.
Yeah, they do a really great job of that. And just like it's a tense scene, and it's like you really want to see Norman for once, like actually really give this guy his comeuppance. And it is one of those things where you're just like, okay, like he's not going to do it right now. It would be too early. It would be too, this would really blow the cap off of everything if he did. Because at this point, in my mind, I'm still thinking, Norman's going to be our killer here and everything. Like he's the guy we're following.
Waiting for it.
Yeah, so it's just like we're waiting for the top to blow off. And, I do like that scene, and I like what it does to establish Norman and Mary's relationship. I think this is truly where she starts to see him in a different light.
Yes.
I think that this is where everything comes to a head, and she starts to realize maybe what she's doing, as will soon to be revealed, isn't the way that she should be handling things. Isn't morally just.
Which, we could jump all over the place. I don't want to kind of go through beat by beat because we'll be here forever. But the relationship, I think the storytelling perspective of from Mary and Norman, I think is one of the big driving points of this film, because it's like, we start out, it's, hopefully you've watched it if you made it this far, that Lila and Mary are in cahoots, daughter and mother, and they are trying to turn Norman back to his old ways. And it's been a plan since the very beginning. It was, all thought out. They've been messing with him the whole time. And it's like one of those things where that's how she starts this off. But then, just like us as audience members, she starts sympathizing with Norman and realizing, maybe he is reformed. He is just trying to live his best life, as they say, and just kind of get back on track, sympathizing with him, even to an extent where she starts fighting with her mother about, this isn't right. He really is just trying to do his own thing, and he's not trying to hurt anyone. But, Lila is steadfast that it's like, nope, we have to get him back. He's going to be behind these killings. This is all him. And, again, looking at the lens through Lila's eyes, I can understand perfectly where she's coming from. And I think that's the brilliant nature of the storytelling, is like character can kind of be like, well, they're not wrong.
Yeah. And, I think that it does kind of create that division in your audience of like, maybe some people see it from their side of things and understand why they're making the decisions they're making. As for me, it's one of those things where it's like, I guess with the amount of horror films I watch and how many unrelatable killers and, mass murderers we follow, I at this point I was rooting for it, because I'm like, wow, like, okay, this is completely flipped. This is where it really sunk its teeth into me, and I was fully gripped into the story. And I was just like, I can't believe like this is the route that they're taking with this. It's like, it is very creative. It's very smart. It doesn't feel like a stretch for a lot of sequels would normally do. This does feel very in line with the first film, in my opinion. I do really, really enjoy this twist. I think that it's probably one of the strongest parts of the film because, again, it caught me completely off guard.
Yeah, and that's where, kind of going into the twists and turns of this film, which I think is again what makes this film so great, because they're kind of melding a lot of different styles. This is kind of like a slasher. This is kind of like a supernatural film as well as a whodunit. So it's kind of like you're really meshing in a lot of different tones and emotions here. So like kind of going through the spectrum of the cast of characters and who could be behind these killings. Your first viewing, what were you thinking? What was going through your head? Because we did talk prior, like you said, and you had brought up something that that resonated with me when I first watched this in terms of who could be behind the killings.
No, I mean, like, I genuinely thought that this was going to be more straightforward. I thought that this would just be like, Norman is going to get released, like, as it was playing out, and they were going to be right. I didn't expect there to be like levels to this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, where it's going to have these twists and turns. If anything, I kind of expected maybe it would just be kind of watching him slowly deteriorate psychologically into kind of becoming, just the Noraman Bates that we know. And, I was ready for that. I thought, okay, that's fine. That's okay. But yeah, adding the twist of Lila and Mary was something really great. And again, I really, for a moment there, thought, this is going to be, his doctor. I really think that, this is going to be one of those things where I'm like, damn, Halloween 2018 really ripped this shit off, didn't they? But no, I was just like, it just really, for a moment there, I felt like, yeah, that makes the most sense. He spent a lot of time with him. Maybe he just wants to, see what's going on, or at least maybe he's working with them. Maybe that's the grand twist, is that, he's a part of the Mary and Lila stuff, which makes his death really tragic. And it's one of the most brutal kills in the entire film. Absolutely mesmerized. We'll get into that with Creatures Features. But it's one of those things where, yeah, that was a hell of a thing. And I was really convinced there for a while that he was going to be the one behind this. But again, the movie did have me really bouncing between everybody who gets introduced at one point or another. I was like, are they going to be the ones? Are they going to be the ones? Because, like, at a certain point, you just sit there and you're like, it can't be Norman. Like, there's just no way. We've spent too much time with him for me to be convinced, like, it would be such a stretch for all those scenes where Mary's upstairs and he's downstairs and she calls out to him after seeing somebody there. It's like, unless they're going to literally say, like, oh, there's back rooms in the house and everything like that, and he just shuffles up and down, it's like, it would be so outlandish. And just as the film progressed, it's just like, that would be ridiculous. And that would really throw a monkey wrench into the whole seriousness and the angle and the respect that they're paying to the source material here, for me to think this is how you're gonna, justify all these actions. So yeah, it was really smart, really a lot of fun to go on this journey.
Yeah, and that's where it's like, I think they build these enough for you to start suspecting everybody, because you don't really know everyone's backstory. Because, like, when you had mentioned the doctor, I was like, one of my first viewing was like, I started stripping away the idea that, first going into it, I was like, okay, so this is going to be about Norman going back to his old ways. And I started kind of losing that. And I was like, so someone else has probably got to be behind these killings. And just the aesthetic perspective alone, I was like, is that a guy? So I was like, is this going to be the doctor kind of coming in here and almost like an exercise to see what he could get Norman to do or fall back into? I thought would have been an interesting kind of idea behind this. But, I think, like, everything in this, again, sympathizing with Lila and what she's been through the past, and how Mary feels for Norman, and how Norman's just trying to get back into society, and the brilliancy of the script, of these characters, of introducing so many pieces in here that really makes you question exactly what's going on. Up until the very end, you still don't know exactly the full story until the credits are rolling. And it's just like, I think Psycho 2 in its storytelling naturally keeps you so enthralled that you just can't help but continue to watch it, because it's like, even watching it a handful of times, I still get lost in the story every time I turn it on.
Yeah, and I'm excited, like I said earlier, to really dive back into the story itself here. But I guess, so for the sake of time, so we can kind of wrap up into it, why don't we divulge the second twist here and talk about kind of the climax of this film a little bit, as to where, so we know that Mary and Lila are behind this. Dominoes start to fall around them. We start seeing characters like the guy at the front desk of the hotel, and everything starts, like, the camera starts looking at him more and more, where it's like, okay, he's hearing some things, and that's going to come back. And, they start finding, we didn't even get a chance to mention this, but there were 2 teenagers that snuck into the Bates, fruit cellar, and, they were going to fool around, but the boy gets murdered while one of the girls gets away. And the police show up, and we get introduced to the police chief, and all of that stuff happens. So there's a lot of people in town who are like, okay, something fishy is going on, and Noraman Bates is written all over it. But yeah, with everything kind of coming to a head, with them finding Mr. Toomey's car, finding his corpse, in the same reservoir, swamp, whatever it was, where he was dumping bodies in the first film. Like, it's all Norman's MO.
And it's all like the last 25 minutes of the movie.
It is. Yeah. Because, like, they really just start everything starts falling forward. And then, we kind of start to realize that there is someone else at play here. Is it Lila? Well, then Lila is murdered. So then it's like, okay, so it's Lila's murdered. It can't be Mary, it can't be Norman. They were down looking at the cars when they were getting pulled out of the water. So it's just all this stuff starts to stack up, and suddenly all your suspects just start getting iced back to front. And then it's Norman and Mary walking around the house trying to figure out who this could be. Is the killer in the house with them? And then the doctor is dispatched, and again his is brutal. And everything really comes to a head, and refresh me if I'm getting anything wrong here. You've seen this more than I have. When Norman is talking on the phone, he's been doing this periodically throughout the film, where he's saying that he's talking to his mother, then he mentions that he has another mother. And, that just is weird. I thought that maybe Norman was just fucking with her.
Yeah.
And that he was like, I know that I'm being fucked with now, so it's like, I'm just going to mess with you because this was uncool and shit. And Mary ends up putting on the costume that they've been using to try to trick Norman and trigger his PTSD. And, everybody's storming the house because they found the bodies, of course. They're here to arrest Norman. And Norman starts like kind of acting all unhinged after his conversation with his mother. And he starts getting stabbed by Mary in the hands and everything. And it's wild. And it's like, it's really, as they get down to the basement and everything, and it's all starting to reveal itself, they see Lila's body in the coal and everything. And Mary is just like distraught. And she's now like stabbed Norman, poked him with a knife enough times to where he's kind of looking all bloody everywhere. And she's going to kill him. Like, she's going to put him down, or at least she's going to subdue him. He gets on his knees. Is he asking her to stop? I forget. Like, maybe you can describe this a little better.
He's believing that Lila or Mary's his mother, and trying to basically help her because the cops are upstairs trying to get inside, so he wants to kind of hide her in the fruit cellar while she's freaking out. So that ends up, as he tries to grab her, is when she's going to once she sees Lila, that's when she's going to actually stab him, because she believes he's been behind everything. And then that's when the police show up and pump her full of lead, as they say.
Yeah, they shoot Mary down, and it all fades to black, and we're back in the police station. With this time, Norman is not the one being interrogated. And
I love how they connect all the dots. They're just like, it was them the whole time. That's what it was. They killed everybody.
They're just like, oh, fuck it. It is what it is. I love the sheriff in this. Like, I thought that he was very funny.
That's what I love just his portrayal. He's not like a huge, but in terms of sheriffs, I think he does such a great job.
Mm-hmm. And very 80s sheriff.
Absolutely.
And then we get to the twist. We do get
Yeah.
to the twist, so we find out that when Norman goes home, he's just kind of doing his thing, walking through the house. You can clearly see that this event has shook him up, but he just seems very off. He doesn't seem like the man that we met at the beginning of our story. And suddenly, another woman shows up. And why don't you explain this part, and then I'll explain my feelings on it.
Okay, so Norman is minding his own business, eating his toasted cheese sandwich, and then there's a knock on the door. Turns out to be Miss Spool from the diner earlier on. Turns out that she is apparently Norman's actual mother, and Norma was her sister, and she gave Norman to Norma because she could not handle having a baby at that time. So she let Norma take care of Norman, and then eventually, comes back around to say, nope, Norma was not your mother. I am actually your mom. And then I guess Norman didn't take the news so well because he hits her on the head with a shovel.
Yeah, he just
and
smacks
credits
her
roll.
Yep, and I think at that point he was just so ready to just get into his the old lifestyle that he had. Like he tried the whole reform thing. He tried to be better. And then, he was robbed of it essentially because of these people's grievances and this grudge held for all these years. And so he's just like, I'm just gonna go back to what I know and what I do best. I'm gonna put mom upstairs and I'm gonna listen to everything she tells me because everybody else led me astray and put me in all these horrible situations. It's interesting. As I've sat with it, I can say I think this is the most far-fetched that the story gets, and I don't necessarily know if I love it, but it's fine for the story that we're telling. I think I'll have to get back to you on this after I've watched it again to see how I feel about it truly. But it is one of those things where it's kind of like, okay, it's the most liberty that I think is taken with the source material of the first film. Yeah. And it is one of those things where it is hard for me to swallow it because they've been so respectful this whole time of everything that came before, and they've grown really well on it. And from what I understand, this is a twist that is kind of retconned into the other two films afterwards. They do kind of walk this back a little bit. It does kind of feel like, they were writing and they had everything was working really nicely. They came to the ending, but they wanted one last little gut punch to really seal Norman's fate as being gone back to his old ways. And this is just what the best thing they could pull out.
That's because Tom Holland was sitting there and he's like, listen, I got the script out. We got to have some sort of good ending here. And he goes, I'm out of ideas. So he dials the number. Who's on the other end of that phone? M. Night Shyamalan.
There you go. And it was the other mother the whole time. It's honestly the cheesiest aspect of this entire film.
Yeah.
And I still think that this movie is of high quality and still worth the watch, even though I think at this moment in time say that this doesn't really work for me. But at the end of the day, I think, I got to remember it is about the journey, less about the destination, because overall, you've got great performances. You've got a very interesting whodunit storyline here with characters, like I said, that everybody's a suspect, truly. So it is one of those things where it's like, man, I can't really fault the film that hard just for something they did within the last couple minutes. I know that some people will do that, but I think everything that was so positive before, and again, this doesn't ruin the movie for me. It's just one of those things where I'm like, okay, you've taken your time, you've set everything up so nicely. This just kind of feels like, well, here you go. Take that. We're done.
Yeah. And that's honestly, I am in complete agreement there. Where, as we said, there's a quality to this film where I think maybe that ending falls a little bit into that 80s stretch that
Mhm.
maybe you were probably expecting with Psycho 2, where I think they just wanted something there. And I know when this film came out for test audiences, they actually did not show that. That was they cut and said you have to see the actual ending in the theaters because it was filmed on a closed set. They didn't want to unveil anything like that. And maybe this would have been better if someone like Miss Spool was uh I guess more of a character throughout the film and not just a random worker at a diner, and we would have gotten more with her, which is like I think you could have done this with a different character that had been more established and it would have been more effective, or unveiling that it was Norman the whole time and he had like his whole setup in his mother's room where he was dressing up like her. I think that could have been a more effective unveiling, rather than just taking a minute character from more so the beginning of the film and then bringing her back to say, oh yeah, remember that character that you don't actually remember. Well, she's the mom, so it does feel like an extra ending as to something that we had already got that was just like, we need something here to really end this film on, even though it doesn't really have that much of a context throughout the rest of the film.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I think now is a better time, or no better time than we should move on to getting into the behind the scenes aspect of this film with a little segment we call Behind the Mask. Yeah, so this is again our behind the scenes segment where we just kind of dive into the production, the making of, and just who is responsible for bringing us this lovely film. Luke, this is your pick, so take us away. What can you tell me about the making of Psycho 2?
Absolutely nothing. No.
Okay.
So this film was actually intended to be a made-for-TV movie. When the initial idea had come out there, in the script, they weren't even sure if Anakin's going to be attached here. Which, watching Psycho and then Psycho 2, and then kind of going through the rest of the collection there, it's hard to imagine Anthony Perkins not returning. But then also, especially during the 80s, to be like, I can't believe they got Anthony Perkins to come back, because it's never been confirmed, but the idea behind it was that if they weren't going to be able to have Anthony Perkins, that Christopher Walken was in the run to pick up the mantle as Norman Bates, which I think would have been an interesting pick if they could not have had Anthony Perkins back.
Yeah, I don't think I could see anybody else doing this. Like again, just seeing how the film played out and everything, like it would be a stretch. Maybe after seeing the film without that knowledge, that would have been something that I could have accepted. But now that I've seen the film and seen the performance that Perkins
Yeah.
gives, it's you can't, like, that's his iconic character. You know what I mean? It's like Robert Englund with Freddy in a sense. I don't think to that big of an extent, but it is one of those things where it's like, yeah, I mean, and we've seen somebody else. We've seen two people play Norman Bates other than that. And one of those is Vince Vaughn. And I love Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
I think especially in his later career here, he's picked a lot of very interesting, very cool roles. But yeah, it didn't work out so well for him in that remake, from what I understand. So, but I think that has a lot more issues than just that. And from what I understand, I don't know the young actor's name, but who plays younger Norman in the show does a great job. But it is one of those things too, where it's like Anthony Perkins owns this role, and to have somebody else kind of step in, I could understand if he didn't want to come back, but yeah, I'm really glad that he did, because it adds so much more legitimacy to the project.
Yeah. And kind of going into some of the what could have been, as we talk about Christopher Walken, the suggestion was made by the producer Hilton A. Green that maybe we could get Jamie Lee Curtis in for that Mary role, which she at the time I think had a scheduling conflict and not wanting to go back to horror. It kind of passed on Psycho 2, which I would have been interesting to see Jamie Lee Curtis in here as well. she played. We'll talk about road games here in a little bit, but I think her as the Mary character would have been a lot of fun.
It would have been great. I mean, honestly, like I love Meg Tilly's performance here. I think she does a great job. But yeah, just the genealogy again to add more legitimacy with having so many returning actors to this film. And then to literally have the daughter of Janet Leigh come back and, you know, play her daughter or her, it would be her niece, wouldn't it? Yeah, her niece. It is one of those things where it's like, that would have been great. Like, that would have been awesome. We all know Jamie Lee would have killed it, especially back in the 80s at this point in time. But yeah, I mean, again, that's a little bit of an easier pill to swallow than recasting Anthony Perkins. But I'm not disappointed. I really think that it can't be understated what a great job Meg Tilly did. Because I know that her sister gets a lot of love because of things like Chucky and stuff that she's been so established in that franchise. But like, she really kicked some major ass in this movie as far as just like, not only, and I'm not even saying like physically, but more just like the mind games that she has to play and everything, and just how she's able to guide the story and really make you feel for Norman. She does add a lot of the heart to the movie.
You know, and it's very surprising because of that relationship that Meg Tilly and Anthony Perkins, you know, bring to those characters. Because one of the little tidbits is, you know, Meg Tilly did not know the significance of Anthony Perkins in Psycho prior to actually filming, which got her into a little bit of trouble, wondering why there was so much spotlight put on Anthony Perkins while they were filming. And Mr. Perkins did not take too kindly of that. So he does kind of look at this as I think she says working with Anthony Perkins was one of the worst experiences she had in Hollywood, and didn't even attend the premiere. So, you know, it's like one of those things where even though that there was a lot of tension on the set between the two, I think the relationship that is built on screen is something that, I mean, we talked about it during the story, really sells this film. You know, just that relationship from beginning to end, in especially the somber note that it does end on, I think really sells. And like going back and having rewatch value for this is to kind of see them kind of hesitant at the start, and then kind of, you know, they never really get there in terms of like a relationship, but you can see them kind of tiptoeing around it, which I think is the fun of the film.
No, I agree. I think that's unfortunate to hear. But again, from my little dabblings into the other sequels, I do understand that it seems like that is not something that is just unique to her. As far as you know, her Anthony Perkins and just how he was on set. Apparently he was a bit abrasive and tough to work with at times. Mick Garris has a very interesting story about working on Psycho 4 and just how to manage someone of that caliber. And you know, it is something where it's like I think you're right. I think, you know, I could go into a whole diatribe about everything here, but I'm just going to say that, like, I think that you're absolutely right that it is not only impressive, but it's great to see that it didn't affect the film, that they were able to sell it, they were able to work it, and it also just shows what a professional Meg Tilly was, to be dealing with somebody who's kind of a prima donna on set and is like, oh, I was in Psycho, like one of the most groundbreaking horror films of the time, and you know, she just still came out with a great performance. So
Absolutely. And the other thing that I'll probably bring up here for production is probably the biggest thing. And that's being the book. This was the catalyst for this film to actually be made, because Robert Bloch, who had made the original Psycho and the source material, Alfred Hitchcock taking that and making the film Psycho, is pretty verbatim. I haven't read the book, but I did a little bit of research, and I know that, you know, we're probably looking at, you know, 98% of the book appears on film, and there is not really a variation there. So, looking at Psycho 2, the novel, versus Psycho 2, the film, completely different animals. Robert Bloch had written Psycho 2. Universal had taken a look at it and said, no, thank you. We don't like what you're doing with the character, and we really want to set out and make our own story and have our own portrayal. And then that came down to, Hilton A. Green, kind of coming together and having a bullet points of ideas of what they want to do, and then kind of bringing Tom Holland on to fill in that connective tissue and making a living, breathing script. Whereas looking at the Robert Bloch novel really cannot be farther from Green here. This is very different. When we open up here, Norman is still incarcerated in a mental institution. He has a doctor named Dr. Claiborne, who is kind of, still working with Norman, but believes that Norman is pretty much back to normal. I guess you'd say as normal as Norman can be. And we have a couple of nuns that show up to the mental institution, and one of them has a background in psychology and is very enthralled with the idea that Noraman Bates is at this mental institution. So she talks to Dr. Claiborne and asks if she could sit down and just talk with Norman. So Norman works in the library. He is sitting down with the nun, and security guard, of course, gets called away during a commotion and a thunderstorm. And Norman strangles the nun with her rosary beads, leaving her naked in the library. He puts on the nun outfit, and during a giant storm runs out of the building and gets into their van. And as he's leaving, the other nun, the much older nun, is also running out and ends up hopping in the van before Norman can full getaway. But because it's dark and it's rainy, she cannot tell that it's Norman. She also lost her glasses in a puddle. So as they are driving down the road, they pull off, and Norman beats her in the head, killing her and dragging her into the back of the van, where he performs some necrophilia, and thinking about the other nun and certain parts of her. And then as he gets back into the driver's seat and is driving down the road, he picks up a hitchhiker because he needs matches so that he can set the van on fire. At this point, we also find out that in Hollywood, they're making a script called Crazy Lady that is basically just about Norman and the events of Psycho. And Dr. Claiborne is none too happy about this. So he is going to go to Hollywood prior to all these events and talk to the producer and director, saying that, you can't make this film. Anyway, we come back to Norman, picks up this hitchhiker. Turns out the hitchhiker wants to kill Norman, and Norman wants to kill the hitchhiker. So as they pull off, Norman is reaching for something to hit the hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker is reaching for something to hit Norman. Then we kind of just cut. We leave it at that. Then we find out that the van that they were both in is ablaze, and they have to put that out. Dr. Claiborne shows up to what is he believes that Norman got away, even though that there are a couple of bodies in the van. He does not believe that Norman is gone. This all happens within the first few chapters, actually.
Jesus. Okay.
Yes. And so he believes Norman is still out there. Then Norman shows up. A specter shows up and kills Lila Loomis and Sam Loomis. And then we go to Hollywood, where we're introduced to a bunch of different characters trying to put together this film. Really plays almost kind of like Scream 3. And as we're trying to put this together, people start dying. And Dr. Claiborne's out there telling them what they can and can't do with the script, such and such. I'm going to kind of give you the cliff notes here because, it's going to take forever. But turns out, as we get to the end of this whole thing, where Norman's at the very beginning of this film, or beginning of this novel, we get to the end where bodies are stacking up. Turns out it was Dr. Claiborne the whole time. Norman died in the van. The hitchhiker killed Norman, so he died in the first few chapters. And Dr. Claiborne was just mad that they were trying to put together this film and started killing people.
Yeah, that's very 80s slasher right there. Like
Yeah,
that's
very.
that's kind of what you would expect, I think, from a
100%.
from an 80s sequel. That's lots of bodies. Gotta have your good old sexual assault in there, all that. Necrophilia is a nice touch. Yeah, no, I'm really happy with what we got. I'm
Yeah,
happy
me
that
too.
I gotta say, good for them for passing on that shit.
Yeah.
Because like that's
It is.
awful.
And then Robert Bloch did write a third follow-up, Psycho House, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Haven't tracked it down yet, but I'm going to give that one a read. And I'm going to
Okay.
report back. I do want to do an extensive deep dive into Psycho 2, the novel versus the film
Okay.
eventually. So we'll deep dive into it. But yeah, so I like reading the book now. I have a new respect for the film because they
Yeah.
really, the writing, the respect that they have of. I could not imagine that portrayal of Norman Bates. Like him, necrophilia of a nun, like really puts a different perspective on everything, especially with the Norman Psycho 2, the film. It's just like what quality we got with Psycho 2, the film, is tremendous comparing it to, especially, it could have just been easy to say, take the source material of Psycho 2, the novel, and put it on screen. But we didn't get that. We got something way better, something with way more integrity. And I think it just makes you love Psycho 2 that much more.
No, I would agree. That's there's a lot of stretches in that story there that I that'd be really hard to, I think, translate to film too. I'm not gonna lie. Like a lot of that, especially trying to convincingly sell that the homeless guy killed Norman and then the rest of the movie you're just supposed to expect it's him. It really leans into that cheese side of things. But nonetheless, are there any other factoids or anything you
No,
want
that
to
was
leave
pretty
us off
much
with?
it.
Okay.
I think we're pretty good. The novel was the big deal.
Okay. Well, how about we head into our next segment, which we like to call Everyone's a Suspect.
See, the police are always off track with this shit. If they watch prom night, they'd save time. There's a formula to it. A very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect.
And this is our cast and crew segment where, we've spent a lot of time talking about Meg Tilly, Anthony Perkins, and we've highlighted a few of the other actors, but we want to go a little bit deeper into this. Luke, this is your pick, so I don't want to hijack this entirely, but I would like to say maybe we could highlight a couple of our, supporting players a little bit more since we've talked so much about Meg Tilly and Anthony Perkins. But I think maybe we'll start right off the rip by just reaffirming, that at least in my mind, I think that those two really are the heart and soul of this film, as they should be, considering they're the main characters. But to know, if you're giving us the backstory of just their working relationship, to see how they were able to kind of overcome that and give us such an interesting portrayal, such a caring portrayal of these two people who really seem to bond and have a great friendship at one point, is truly pretty impressive, especially knowing that they had to deal with some behind the scenes turmoil between the two.
Yes, and this honestly, Psycho 2, yes, we had the big players that really drive the film itself, but a lot of the supporting cast here, man, is just when you're trying to fill out a world or a town like Fairvale, I think they did it perfectly. Going into Dr. Raymond, Robert Loggia, I mean, good gosh, he was in Scarface. I think maybe the same year. I can't remember exactly, but really close to that. So it's like, for me, there aren't many people that can give Dr. Loomis a run for his money, but I think Dr. Raymond was a lot of fun, and especially playing against well, I guess not necessarily playing against. He was in Norman Bates' camp the whole time, and I like that he kind of had that buddy that there. He was like believing him, and also trying to prove that, Norman, you're not crazy. There are people out there that are trying to make you crazy, and just Robert Loge's performance throughout. While it's not very substantial, but it's pretty evident. I think he plays that supporting kind of confidant to Norman throughout this, and it's like he plays such a great doctor. It's like I can't remember that many things that he's in other than Scarface and Big, but like even those films, he steals the show in.
Yeah, I was gonna say Scarface, Big. When I pulled him up on IMDb, it also listed that he was in Independence Day. I think I recognize his face, because that was on constant repeat in my house during the summertime. And basically anytime it was on TV, I feel like we were playing it. So it's one of those ones where I've gotten to recognize his face. But yeah, he does a great job. I would say of all the supporting cast, he's probably the next standout I would go with. Again, I enjoyed his character a lot. Unfortunately, he has passed on, so we won't be getting any more performances from him. But yeah, I mean, like to have him kind of come in and play with some of these modern takes would have been interesting to see. Maybe have him step in to a doctor role in the most recent Halloween trilogy. Could have been interesting to see. I mean, he just really embodies that role quite well. And you're right. I like the friendship that he has with Norman there, where they go and they see his mother's corpse and everything. He's like, "Do you believe me now?" and everything like that. He's genuinely trying to help him, and that I think is just one of the best parts of his performance. Is like he just feels genuine. And then even up to the final moments, it's like he is doing this all for Norman, and to prove that he can be reformed and everything is not as it seems. And yeah, unfortunately, he does meet a bitter end, which we'll get into in our next segment.
And then, going from a real nice character to a real bastard of a character, we can talk about Warren Toomey, Mr. Toomey, the gentleman running the Bates Motel while Norman is away, played by Mr. Dennis Franz. Man, again, another small part, but every scene that he's in, he makes count. From that diner scene to even his introduction.
Yeah, I was gonna say his intro is very, very entertaining. When the motel's got to make money, doesn't it? Kind of thing.
And even before, when Mary is sitting there and he doesn't know Norman is there, and he goes, "Oh, Norman's getting me a room," and the way he hesitates and he goes, "Bates's," and then he shows up and the look on his face. I mean, Dennis Franz absolutely sells that Warren Toomey character. It's like playing right against Norman like that. It's like you hope that it's like, man, I want Norman to go back to his old ways just so he can slash you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is that character that you love to hate, and he plays it excellently. I recognize him. He was also kind of a dickhead in Die Hard 2. But he was, obviously, I believe he was either one of the air traffic control guys or a security guard of some sort. I know he worked with the airport, I believe. It's been a while since I've seen Die Hard 2, but his face stood out to me, and I was like, I think he's in one of the Die Hard movies. So when I looked it up, I was like, there you go. That's where I recognized him from. But yeah, no, I do enjoy Mr. Toomey a lot. I again, love to hate him. And everything from the diner sequence to even when he is dispatched and he's outside, tormenting Norman from downstairs, like, "I'm just letting you know that I'm leaving," and blah blah blah, "you psycho," and all that stuff. Like, he's great up until the very end. And yeah, I think that it's a fun performance. You could tell he seemed like he was really enjoying reveling and just being a pure crass piece of shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's a very, very well acted, very well portrayed role. Honestly, it's one of those things where it's like, even though they sucked and you liked seeing them go, it's one of those things where it's like, damn, I wish we just had one more confrontation, one more scene, or we could have at least seen Norman be the one to dispatch him, even though at the time I don't want Norman to. It's conflicting for me.
Yeah, I know, because it just seems so abrupt sometimes where it's like, yeah, I would have loved to seen I would have loved to have seen Mr. Toomey kind of be that overlaying bastard throughout like the majority of the film, like wondering is is Mr. Toomey behind a lot of this stuff, messing with him? Especially him uh, getting fired at the very beginning, I think would have been interesting rather than that abrupt ending. But again, I think it's just for me excuse to see more Dennis Franz on screen because he brought so much life to that character, and it's just like a lot of these characters again filling out that world. It sells the performance from Anthony Perkins that much more, and I think another character that helps sell that Anthony Perkins performance is Vera Miles, and it's just like having her return from the original Psycho to play the role. While it's not again a huge role, it's very serviceable to the story and brings that tension when it's needed. Especially as we get closer to the end. And again, we can resonate with her. I mean, in terms of her motivation and what she's doing, and she sells that perfectly.
Yeah, and I mean, like you were saying there, it's just one of those things to me, having her come back adds legitimacy to your sequel. And just the way that she was willing to kind of throw herself into basically 180ing herself from being the hero of one film to basically the villain of that. Mad respect to her on that front, because like I don't see a lot of actors, especially actors of that time period when it comes to like the 1960s. I feel like they wouldn't be interested in that.
Yes.
I mean, you even talk about oh my god, why is her name escaping me? I'm gonna get ripped up in the comments for that. But who played Pamela Voorhees, and how she absolutely hesitated hard with playing that role because it was so against type with everything that she had done before. Betsy Palmer, that's
there we go. Oh my gosh,
yeah,
I got my eyes
Betsy
got
Palmer.
huge because I was like trying to
I know,
remember
right?
who that was.
We're throwing a lot of names out. We've been talking for an hour and a half, so I get it. But it's one of those things where it's like it takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts, I would say, for somebody of that caliber to really step in and say, yeah, I'm gonna take the plunge here, and I'm going to really commit, and I'm going to make myself kind of disappear into this role and maybe take the side of the bad guy. Again, morally gray, because I could see people saying, yeah, she's justified. She wants that psycho off the streets. You can see the cracks forming, just with a couple of pushes. Like, God forbid, he meets a few more Mr. Toomeys in his life, and then what happens, But at the same time, it's like she never gave him a chance. She never gave him the opportunity to prove his change. And I can't believe I'm saying that about Noraman Bates. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know,
like,
right? Again,
it's
effective screenwriting.
It's very well done. And probably the last two people we want to highlight here would be Hugh Gillen as Sheriff Hunt. Yes. Again, we spoke highly of him as just another great 80s sheriff. Very much fits into that. I could see him being the sheriff of Haddonfield. I could see him being the sheriff of Tarker's Mills. Anywhere. Like he's got that persona, that vibe. It's a very excellent cast. Like he just fits it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if I could shoot a film in the 80s, he'd be on my short list of people to try to get to play a sheriff.
Yeah, and I love that he's just so certain. Like he's relaxed at times when Robert telling him all the things that are happening. He goes, I'll look into it. I'll look into her too. You know what I mean? Like, and then as soon as he starts suspecting things, it's like, why are you in town? I love that change up that he does. He, again, not a big role, but every time that he's there, he's got that range of emotion that it's like, I feel what he's talking about. You know what I mean? So, and I love his delivery at the end when he's like connecting all the dots for everybody. He's like, wow, that was them. That was them. They were trying to set Norman up. I just love his delivery and anything. Again, a perfect sheriff. I don't know if he ever played a sheriff again. But like that should have been his long-standing role.
Absolutely. I do know he was the mayor in Back to the Future 2 when I looked into his filmography. So it's one of those things where it's like you can kind of recognize him from probably that. As I dive through this again, he does reprise his role in the third film as Sheriff Hunt again. So, you have that to look forward to if you, decide to keep pursuing the Psycho series. And yeah, I guess the last person that we'd want to highlight here would probably be Claudia Breyer, she is the twist. She is Miss Spool. So she has that ultimate, I wouldn't say a make it or break it twist, but either you're on board or you're skeptical. For me, I lean a little heavier on the skeptical side. Not to say that her performance was bad in any way. Again, that comes down to the writing and the decision to do that. I personally think, going back to that twist just for a second, because I was beating myself up for not saying it, but I've kind of opened the door again, is to say I think it would have been a much more effective ending to almost have it bookend with the first film and show Norman as the victim this time instead of the crazy person with the slow zoom. That would have been cool, but hey, again, it doesn't ruin the movie for me. It is a nice moment. Honestly, it's a fun moment to see him smack her in the head with the shovel. It really does show you that Norman is back. And of course, they end with that beautiful shot that we use for the background here of his silhouette and her corpse up in the window. So I think she's great. She doesn't get a lot of screen time, but that one moment, she does sell it to me as, her kind of being unhinged, but very subtly. Overall, I'm not going to, again, downplay her for that. But yeah, the twist is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, she's there. Again, they don't really give her too much. Her delivery at the end, I think, is great. For me, I think that's probably her shining moment of when she's explaining everything to Norman. But yeah, I mean, great actress, just a small role. But like what they do give her, she does make use of. And her end there's an exclamation point on the film. So, overall, just not a lot for her to do.
Yeah. Alrighty, I think we should move into probably a pretty quick segment for us, but one that we hit every time. We are moving on to the effects side of things, where we're going to be talking creatures, features. So yes, this is our effects segment in this podcast, as we like to do. We talk about a lot of effects heavy films, everything from John Carpenter's The Thing, From Beyond, all that. Even our first podcast talking about all those great werewolf effects.
Oh yeah.
This is one of those movies. Yeah, Spawn. Yep, true. All those great CGI effects that aren't dated at all.
Not at all.
Now you got me thinking about the clown in there, John Leguizamo. Back on track. Not a lot of effects in this film, which you expect that in these kind of movies. There's going to be that. It's not a very effects heavy film, but I think what they do is serviceable. I like the gore that they do bring into it, which, as it is an 80s horror film, it's a little bit more reserved than most, but they do tend to show a good bit. The only two that I think are a little questionable are the reveal of first off, Mr. Toomey's death is you can tell it hasn't aged the best in the sense of him getting stabbed in the face and everything. And then Lila's reveal does look a little prosthetic-y, sitting in the coal there. But they're still not bad effects. Really, I think one of the standout moments for me was the reveal of Norman's mother's corpse and just how it's almost like you have that exact same skeleton, just colorized. I would not be surprised if they were able to dig up and use the same prop somewhere. Because
I think it was in Poltergeist.
So, was it really?
I believe that's what I read. I don't quote me 100%, but I believe it was the same used in Poltergeist.
Nice, because
first ones.
It's very convincing from what I remember from the Psycho film. It looks spot on. And yeah, I would say probably the standout moment for me as far as effects go is definitely Dr. Raymond's death. I mean, again, I spoke about it a couple of times where it's super brutal for him to get stabbed and then fall over the edge just to have it driven deeper into him and kind of busting through. Like, it's great. It's gory. It's a lot of fun. I quite enjoyed that.
No, yeah. I would say I'm on the same page with you. That one is pretty brutal, especially with a character that we liked so much, and especially him trying to do what's right by Norman, saying, "Oh, I got you," and then he accidentally gets stabbed and then falls right down. And it's just, kind of a callback to the original Psycho, I think. Him falling down the steps and then that thing just driving right into, I think it's his chest, right?
It's his chest.
And a very, very interesting kind of death. FX wise, I think that's kind of the thing that sticks you, like you said. Mr. Toomies does not age too well. The knife through Lila Loomis's mouth is not too bad. I always remember that one, but I think that the Dr. Raymond death is probably the standout, I would say, of the entire film. But again, this is a more story driven, not really effects. So I knew this was going to be a little light segment for us.
Absolutely. But alrighty, I guess we'll wrap that up and head right into our final segment, which we lovely call It's Only a Movie.
Action to play this theater. This picture, truly one of the most unusual ever filmed, contains scenes which under no circumstances should be viewed by anyone with a heart condition or anyone who is easily upset.
To avoid fainting, keep repeating. It's only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie.
Yeah, so this is our final segment, the legacy segment, where we just like to kind of wrap things up, see where the film kind of stands with us, where we think it'll stand with time, and just what we overall our thoughts on Psycho 2. And Luke, since this is your pick, I'm going to let you take it away. Tee us up here, and then I'll give my final thoughts.
My pick, no secrets, that I think this film is honestly my go-to in terms of the Psycho collection. It's just a lot of fun. I think it's so well done. I always say that I respect sequels so much because you have that first story that's going to lay the groundwork, but you got that second story. It's almost like a relay race. They got to take it and they got to withstand the storytelling from the first one. And I think Psycho 2 really does take a lot of great stuff from the original and then amplifies it in the second one, in terms of the Noraman Bates character and just where they go with it. And like Dylan said at the beginning, this has got that great 80s feel for you. So it's like when you're in that rotation of just watching films, Psycho 2's a breeze to just throw on and watch for an hour 45. And again, this doesn't feel like an hour 45. It feels like it just goes and it moves. A great tension building, great character work. The great casting. And I think the biggest thing about this is taking something so iconic like that first one and daring to add to that lore, and with great script writing. I think the storytelling here is really where this film shines.
I would agree. I think that, of course, I second all your sentiments there. I think that this is a very underrated movie. Again, I compared this to Jaws 2 as we started this podcast, because to me, that is an extremely underrated film. I mean, I am a diehard shark lover and, a diehard shark film lover. I like all that stuff. I'm a very easy sell with my creature features. But I get the comparison. I totally, it rang true in my head as soon as those credits rolled, where I was just like, yeah, it's a sequel to an all-time classic that holds its own, that expands the characters, brings more to the story. And honestly, now that I've watched it, I can say that when I go back and watch Psycho, I'll be excited to throw Psycho 2 on right after. Because again, it works. Again, I take issue with some of the final twist, but it's not a deal breaker. It doesn't ruin the movie for me. It is one of those things where it's like, it's a nice little bookend to it. For me, again, it doesn't completely work, but I am totally fine with it. It doesn't break the bank. And I think that this is definitely, as far as like Luke said, with performances, with really the storytelling. So like big pat on the back to Tom Holland there, for really taking his time and bringing something that not only pays respect to the first film, but again, expands the material, which is hard to do. And we don't see it that often in Hollywood, especially in the 80s with sequels. So I got to say, there was the rumbling around the campfires at Psycho 2 was something impressive. I'm happy to say that I'm a fan now and that I will be adding this to my Blu-ray collection sooner rather than later.
I mean, it just great stuff overall. Things that we neglected to mention was Richard Franklin as a director.
Yeah.
Did Road Games, which is on my list to for Dylan to check out and for us to cover the podcast eventually. Really a daunting task to take the helm of the Psycho franchise after Alfred Hitchcock and to do something, and then also Dean Cundy putting together cinematography here falls really in line with, a lot of those 80s films. He did Escape from New York. We talked about The Thing last month. All this stuff. And again, all this is the perfect storm to a great sequel to such an iconic film already. And dare I say, a more rewatchable film? In my take, I think so.
I couldn't agree more. But alrighty, guys, I think that's going to wrap us up here for Psycho 2. Definitely hope that you check this thing out before you dove into it, because, yeah, it caught me off guard. It's got a lot of good twists and turns. If you are a longtime fan of Psycho 2, let us know when you discovered it. Let us know how you found it and your thoughts on it. Is it something that took time to grow with you, or is it something that you've loved since the moment you've seen it? Do you think that this film is as underrated and underpraised as we believe? Or do you think that this has been something that has been on people's radars for a while? Let us know all your thoughts on Psycho 2 down below. Of course, if you are new to this channel and you're just discovering us for the first time, hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 1,000 subscribers. Trying to get there at about May when we hit our year mark. That's the big push right now. We've got a lot of great content on the channel as well. Interviews. Just checking it out before we've wrapped things up here. I looked like we've had just a copious amount of videos between this podcast and the last. We used to do these every 2 weeks. Now we're doing them once a month. So it's like, yeah, we've been very busy, boys, and we got a lot of great stuff on the horizon for you to come. Lots of big movies coming into March. And next is my pick. So it's still to be determined in my mind. I've got a couple of things floating around. Luke has known of one of them that I floated to him, but we will see. But yeah, I was definitely pleased with this pick, and I'm excited to discuss another film next month with all of you and really dive deep into what lies next for us. So,
As am I.
Until next time, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.